Good morning, everyone. We would like to thank all of you for coming here today for our second annual conference, which is sponsored by the College of Humanities and Social Sciences and also by the Education Enrichment Center here at William Paterson University. My name is Deniz Yüsel. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology, and I'm also the co-chair of the HSS Conference Committee. We're very happy to see our colleagues and students in the audience today. We hope that you can join us not only for the morning session, but also for the keynote speaker, which will start at 11 o'clock, and also for our afternoon panel, which will start at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. But to begin, we will have some welcoming remarks from the Dean of the College of Humanities of Social Sciences, Dr. Dean Kara Rabbit, and she will then be followed by the Provost of the University, Dr. Warren Sandman. So, Dean Rabbit.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to see such a good turnout at 9:30 in the morning. An impressive dedication on the part of the students and of the faculty who brought you here. So I am Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences here at William Paterson University. And as the little insert in your program tells you, we are dedicated to the primacy of liberal arts in higher education and to the advancement of knowledge. We believe that we need to critically examine contemporary issues, explore answers for the future, and promote the value of diversity. Clearly, this conference is part of that mission. We are trying to engage people from across the college and across the campus in a dialogue around one of the key issues that is facing America today, which is what will be the future of higher education. How are we evolving in this institution that formed all of us in administration and faculty and is in the process of forming you? What will education look like as we move forward as a society in this country? And how can we be sure that our commitment to your career preparation and your engagement in your future doesn't sort of demote what we believe in so strongly in terms of the value of education in advancing knowledge, in promoting social awareness, and in moving forward other aspects of the mission that are not just job preparation. So how we can balance those issues is part of what we're looking at today. And I'm very pleased with the conference that the committee has put together, because it really gives us a chance to engage critically, comprehensively, some of the challenges. Those of us at this institution in general, and certainly I can say personally, are profoundly dedicated to the mission of public higher education. I, for example, came through the public education system, and that prepared me. I went on and I did my doctorate in an Ivy League, but I came back very deliberately to public higher ed because I feel that this is the most important aspect of culture in terms of moving forward. It's an economic engine for the country. It is how we engage as citizens. It is how we help to ensure the education of children, whether or not they go into higher education afterwards, and that we need to continue to support and evolve in higher education. I grew up in a time with a little bit more state and federal funding, and I talk a lot when I speak with alumni and donors of how much that has shifted nationally, and certainly in New Jersey. A lot more of the weight of your tuition is on your shoulders than it was even a generation or two ago of people going through public higher education. And I talk about how important it is that education serves not only you as individuals, the student who goes forth with the degree, and we know it serves you, despite various sort of current dialogues around that. There is ample research that shows how big of an impact holding the college degree makes for you in the long term, and not only for you, but for your children. It is one of the biggest, born or unborn, it is one of the biggest factors that impacts whether or not the children that will follow in your family will go on to become college educated. So those are the sort of broader questions, but I also think that we are as a society, really had a chance to look at what are the deeper, more philosophical questions. What do we hold as our core elements of knowledge at the university? And that's what I'm so glad that we start with this first panel. How do we address issues of diversity, identity, advancing knowledge? So I won't go into everything that's in the conference today because you have a great program in front of you. But my job is particularly to thank the group that put this together. Again, this is part of the college's mission in moving forward, and there was a great deal of vision of the college as a community to come forth and create this annual event. The Associate Dean of the college, Dr. Wartina Davis, back of the room, has been a real leader in this initiative, and she worked with an outstanding committee this year who put together the panels for you today. You've already met one of the co-chairs, Dr. Denise Yücel. The other conference co-chair is Dr. Madhuri Mukherjee, who is out and also in the back of the room. And then the additional members of the committee include people who are handing out programs to you, people who are signing you up outside. We have Dr. Maria Kremidas from Department of Anthropology, Dr. David Rivera from Department of Psychology, Dr. Steve Thompson from Philosophy, who was just outside. And this is inevitably when I say, did I miss anybody? And Professor West Moss from the Department of English. So I want to thank them for their vision, their dedication and work. Thank you for being here, thank the panelists, and invite Provost Sandman to say a few words.
Well, thank you, Dean Rabbitt. And welcome to the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at William Paterson University and our second annual multidisciplinary conference. You know, the focus of today's conference is both exciting and a bit frightening. It's exciting in that we will spend the day focused on something that is so important to us, the future of higher education. Yet it's a little bit frightening in that there seem to be so many more voices of opposition and even voices of negation that are out there today, talking about what is going on with higher education. Even some of those making the claim that higher education as we know it is a failure, is flawed. This can be frightening. But I believe it is more accurate and certainly more useful if we spend time today talking about the exciting part of the future of higher education. Now, this is not to gloss over the obstacles that are facing higher education, especially, as Dean Rabbitt noted, public higher education. Especially the place and the role of humanities and social sciences in public higher education. There are numerous voices out there in the popular press, among our politicians, from the corporate boardrooms, all of whom are calling into question the performance of higher education, also to a larger extent reducing higher education to little more than vocational training, as if the only function and the only measuring stick for higher education is whether or not a graduate receives, and not even whether they are prepared and able to perform and educated for these positions, which is at least a more defensible position, but whether or not they simply receive a well-paid position upon graduation. There are also other challenges facing higher education concerning the cost and time to completion for college, and I find a little more sympathy with some of these arguments. But there is more nuance needed, and nuance does not play well in headlines. Higher education is costly, and here in New Jersey, the cost of public higher education is at or near the breaking point, especially for those, so many of us, who really need that, who come from a background where public higher education is our way out, our ticket, our way of receiving the culture, the education that Dean Rabbitt spoke about. But nuance is needed. The actual cost of higher education, what it costs to prepare you, to train you, to educate you, the actual cost has not grown nearly as fast as the headlines would have us believe. What has happened, and what Dean Rabbitt noted, is there's been instead a significant shift in who pays that cost. When I went through college the state paid for about 80%. Today, in many states, it's down to 10%. In New Jersey, it's roughly about a third. The shift has been who pays for that education, and more of the burden is now on you in tuition, in fees, in what you have to pay for your education. William Paterson University is a state institution, and that state tuition dollars have continually declined, and our student tuition becomes more and more how we fund it. So the nuance. Cost goes up, but the shift in revenue is really the big driver here. And now this is not really a diatribe against the state of New Jersey or against other states here as well too. New Jersey, just as so many other states, is facing a series of economic challenges. People are aging. Medical costs continue to rise. Social service needs continue to increase. Wages for so many people are stagnant at best. Revenue sources, even for those whose political will to find them are there, are stretched over more and more areas. Higher education is far from alone in facing these battles. But while we face these budget battles, we also face questions over what is at the heart of higher education: teaching and learning. No longer is the public, politicians, parents, employers, and you as students willing to simply trust those of us in higher education that we are doing what we say we are doing, that we are educating students both for active roles as citizens and for productive members of an economic society. As budget issues turn the spotlight ever more brightly and ever more tightly on what we do here in higher education, that light does shine on other challenges. Are our students able to do what we say they can do? Do they know what we say they know? Is what we teach and what they and society and employers need what we do? Is higher education, and especially that which touches upon the humanities, still relevant and needed today? Not surprisingly, my answer to the last question is a resoundingly yes. Acknowledging that we do need to examine our practices and adapt our ways of teaching and our methods of assessing and evaluating learning, I still am strongly convinced of the relevance of higher education and the need for humanities and social sciences. And this is not just me. Even among all the voices that are questioning higher education, there is a strong tone that realizes all the importance of what we do, preparing people to think, to argue, to critique, to analyze, to communicate, to work and live in a diverse society. These are all central to what we do in higher education and to what education, the humanities, and social sciences afford students. So today, we have an opportunity to think, to listen, to question, and I hope as well to act, to learn more about the future of higher education and to be part of these ongoing changes that are facing higher education today. So, welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Provost Sandman and Dean Rabbit. We now begin our first panel this morning, and our first panelist is Dr. Susan Lawrence. She's joining us from Rutgers University today. She's the Dean for Educational Initiatives and the Core Curriculum in the School of Arts and Sciences. She's also a fellow in the University Center of Organizational Development and Leadership. She is also an associate professor of political science at the same university. Building on a record of scholarship and teaching in public law and judicial behavior, Professor Lawrence has served as departmental vice chair for undergraduate studies, as well as the associate dean for undergraduate education, before she started her role as the associate dean for educational initiatives and the core curriculum. Her publications include the award-winning book titled The Poor in Court, the Legal Services Program and the Supreme Court Decision Making, which was published in 1990. And her review titled, What is Higher Education's Role When Anyone Can Learn on the Internet, was published in October 2013. So Dr. Susan Lawrence, we welcome you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I first must apologize for my voice. My daughter decided to share, and I've shared a cold with her for the last week, and last night it turned into laryngitis, a bit of laryngitis. So Thank you. So I apologize for that, but let me proceed. I want to thank you very much for the kind invitation. The people who cut my paycheck demand that I do acknowledge the university I come from. I come from the other really large state university in New Jersey, down the pike. We're named for someone considerably less distinguished than William Paterson, but nonetheless, Rutgers University. And I think there's some old friends in the audience too. I want to thank Provost Sandman. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect big picture lead-in. And Dean Kara Rabbit and Dean Martina Davis, who first reached out to me and reminded me that we knew each other many years ago. The committee and the committee that developed your core curriculum has been quite cordial and wonderful. And let me thank you very much this morning. Now, one of the reasons this invitation was so appealing was because they told me right off the bat that this would be largely focused towards students. So I took a very pragmatic approach. And I think what you'll find is the talk I developed very much bridges what Provost Sandman was just talking about the state of higher education in the United States today. And the kind of nitty-gritty question of, well, why do I have to take a core curriculum anyway? Okay. Now, this is largely a room of people that we've convinced at least 50% of the way, because you've chosen to major in humanities and social sciences. Okay. But at the school I work at, we have the natural sciences in with us as well, and the physical and mathematical sciences. So it's a challenge sometimes speaking to that joint student body. So what I want to talk about this morning is, why does the core curriculum matter? Why do students have to take a core curriculum or general education requirements, here or anywhere? Describing the worth of a core curriculum is a bit like trying to explain why a walk on the beach at sunset is appealing. You know it is. If you've experienced it, you know it is. But trying to put that in words is difficult. The real question, I think, when you ask what's the value of a core curriculum, is what is the value of liberal arts? Because the core curriculum is a liberal arts foundation for all areas of specialization the university offers. Indeed, did you know that for a business school to be, undergraduate business school to be accredited, they have to have a core curriculum or general education requirements taught by a separate faculty? And that has to be a substantial proportion of the degree. So even business schools recognize the importance, although perhaps not quite as much as we'd like. The core curriculum in liberal arts is what it really means to be educated, not just trained for a career, but educated. It's the path to discovery of yourself and the world around you. It's as John Adams said, who was another of our founding fathers, along with your own William Paterson. As he reminds us, there are two types of education. One should teach us to make a living, and the other, how to live. I want to talk about the role of core curriculums in both kinds of education today. I'll start where perhaps many of you do, and perhaps many of your parents do, with making a living. Part of why the question of why the core curriculum has come under so much question of late is that American society is at a crisis point. College goers and parents are scared, and they probably should be. The middle class is shrinking, and faith in the American dream is faltering. Higher education is seen as the ladder to the middle class. It's supposed to secure a place in the middle class. I don't have to tell you the cost of higher education has escalated and hence seems to be a bar to entry to the middle class. But even for those who do make it through higher ed, there are depressing statistics about their job prospects. The reaction has been to look back at the higher education they received and blame it for not preparing the students for the workforce. And frankly, I think there's a bit of scapegoating going on. Higher ed is probably better now than it's ever been at preparing students for the workforce. And the ability to access and constructively use information and knowledge, the heart of liberal arts and sciences education, has never before been as important to the economy. But despite the hype from Washington and the media pundits, I believe the problem is not what we're asking you to learn here at the university. The problem is there's a shortage of well-paying jobs in this economy. And that's why college graduates are having a hard time getting good jobs right out of college and problems paying back student loans. The middle class is shrinking for reasons that have little to do with the state of higher education in America. There are a lot of myths out there that new college graduates can't get jobs, that student loan debt is staggering, that you need a business or science major to get a job. And if we had more time, I could show you that all of them are, at best, only partially true, and in fact, misleading. Let me take the one that has bugged me the most. New college graduates can't get jobs. And one of the reasons it bugs me is because it has been a headline grabber based in statistics that came out of a study at my own university. The Heldrich Center for Workforce Development did this study. And I have my Google alerts set so that every time Rutgers is mentioned in the news, I get, a list of all the stories. And I kept getting all these stories about college graduates can't find jobs, liberal arts majors can't find jobs, blah, 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 blah. I worked on a course with people at the Heldrich Center on workforce development and career preparation for liberal arts students. And I've looked at this data quite closely. Let me show you this data. This is what the data that those headlines are based in actually looks like. So, only 51% are employed full-time of college graduates. Well, wait a minute. Does that mean 49% can't find jobs? No, not at all. If you subtract out those that are employed full-time, those that are in the military, those that are attending graduate school or professional school and not employed, those that are working part-time and not even looking for full-time work, you are left with about 20% that we maybe should be worried about. Those who are looking for work or are unemployed and not looking for work. Now, it's not that I don't care about that 20%, but that's a much different headline than half of college graduates can't get jobs. Furthermore, the data is a sophisticated random sample of students, but it lumps together students that have taken a philosophy major from Online U that they saw advertised at 3 o'clock in the morning one day, with the economics major from William Paterson, with the 2.0 GPA social work major at Rutgers, and the bio major from Princeton. You get my point? Not all college degrees are equal. It just lumps it all together, and it doesn't do anything to tell us where the problem might be. Now, contrast something that got a lot less headlines, but did at least make the New York Times in May 2013. The current unemployment rate for college graduates is only 3.9%. compared with 7.5% for the workforce as a whole. And do you know only about a third of adults in the United States have a bachelor's degree, a four-year college degree? Young college graduates are finding jobs. The unemployment rate for people in their 20s with at least a bachelor's degree was 5.7%, and only a high school degree, 16.2%. I know which category I'd rather be in. And in 2012, the typical full-time worker with a bachelor's degree earned 79% more than a similar full-time worker with no more than a high school diploma. And in fact, if you look over time, which is one of the things a core curriculum and a liberal arts education teaches you to do, is you can see that the gap between what a full-time worker with a high school degree earns and what a full-time worker with a college degree earns, that gap has been growing over time. But why do these myths take hold? That's what's the interesting thing here, I think. In part because I think we at the university often fail to make transparent to you how what we're asking you to learn will help you, in the words of John Adams, make a living. Liberal arts faculty, in particular, arts and humanities, tend to be focused on self-actualization. This is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. But a lot of people are focused down here. Times are scary. You need to meet those fundamental needs. And in this economy, that means you need to have a job. How does this education we're offering you help you get and keep a job? Build that foundation upon which you can build the rest of this. And indeed, the fact is that job, that career, that life in the workplace has implications up the hierarchy as well after you leave us. Workplaces and the relationships we build in them are very important in fulfilling the need for love and belonging and esteem. Indeed, the best studies in the Harvard Law Review show that progress in meaningful work is the primary motivator on the job, well ahead of traditional incentives like raises and bonuses. In requiring a core curriculum, our aspiration for you is that you'll find a career that enhances your self-esteem and self-actualization, that you will find a calling, and that it will be economically sustainable. Job satisfaction comes from the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, and what the world needs. Don't know what career that's going to lead to? That's okay. How many careers could you write down right now? 20 maybe, possible careers. The New Jersey Department of Labor Workforce Development lists over 460 occupations that currently pay over the New Jersey median salary. There's a lot more occupations out there than you've thought of as careers. And there will continue to be more as the world continues to change. But more about that in a moment. So what does all this have to do with the core curriculum? We have a translation problem. I think that's fundamental to the political problems the provost talked about. And I think it's fundamental to the conversations we have every day with students and their parents. As you know, the core curriculum at William Paterson focuses on personal well-being, expression, ways of knowing, diversity and justice, community and civic engagement, and global awareness. It's a beautiful core curriculum. The language in which employers talk about what they want in employees across majors, across careers, regardless of your specialization, doesn't match up very well with how we describe the core, or indeed the whole college experience. You never read a job ad that says, wanted, college graduate with facility and ways of knowing, training in diversity and justice, and skilled in personal well-being and civic engagement. strong expression skills, and global awareness a must. Okay, that was supposed to be kind of a laugh line. I think it came out better before I lost my voice. There seems to be a disconnect there. But if you look more closely and think beyond the different labels academics and employers give things, they do in fact match up quite well. As this unrolls, let me read it through to you. Ethics, integrity, work ethic, and self-management skills. In fact, it's a lack of these that is the primary reason most people get fired. Not laid off, but when people actually get fired from a job, 9 times out of 10, it's an ethics, integrity, work ethic problem. Critical analytical thinking, adaptability, and problem solving. I'll come back to this one. And in the meantime, now that it's all scrolled out, get out your cell phones and take a picture of this. You're going to want it. Information gathering, IT literacy, and office technology. Applied math and data management. Communication, written and communication, verbal and face-to-face. Teamwork, leadership, and project management. Additional useful skills and knowledge, such as language, advanced IT skills, subject matter expertise. Now, how do I know this? I come from a research university, and many of your faculty here are important, active researchers, and that's the culture in which we want to instill in you. That's part of the liberal arts mission, is to ask questions. How do I know this? Okay. I spent a summer reading through survey after survey after survey of employers and articles about what is wanted in the workforce. And over again, these are the things that came up. I compiled all that information. I took all the different lists. Some of them called them slightly different things. I grouped them together in categories. I've got a whole bibliography that goes with this. Now, are you ready to tell me the truth? I'm speaking to the students here and maybe some of the faculty. How many of you would take writing and math courses if we didn't make you do it through general education requirements? How many of you have tried to get out of some of your writing and math classes by saying, oh, I'm going to transfer this in or this, that, or the other thing? Or I did my writing in some other course, won't that count? Well, you know what? Nobody ever died from too much writing. And there's not a person in this room, excuse me for speaking to our distinguished people in the room, but I think they'll agree with me. And I certainly would include myself in this. There's not a person in this room that doesn't get edited and could not improve their writing skills. And when you see beautiful writing, it's not the first draft you turned in to get a grade. Not that you always do that, but it's gone through many, many drafts. But the real heart of the thing, the real meat of the thing, is this critical thinking, this analytical thinking, and problem-solving skills. These are embedded in every liberal arts and sciences course you take, particularly in your ways of knowing requirements. They're not so clear that it's not so clear they're there in technical courses, many business courses like accounting, and courses that just ask you to memorize a set of information and spit it back on an exam undigested. Memorization has its place, but only to have that information at your fingertips so that you can use it. Well, what do employers mean by critical thinking? And what do we mean by critical thinking? Every college tells you they develop your critical thinking skills. How do we do that? Employers want employees that can ask and answer relevant questions and present them clearly and precisely, bringing appropriate information to bear on the matter at hand. We ask you guys to do that all the time. How many of you have struggled to figure out a paper topic for a course and how to best research it? They want employees who will question first instincts, consider and test alternate conclusions, solutions, identify assumptions, implications, and real-world consequences. The core and liberal arts, more generally, is fundamentally about suspending judgment in the absence of evidence, and about being genuinely curious about your own beliefs as well as the world around you. They want students who can integrate knowledge across, or employees who can integrate knowledge across disciplines and recognize multiple perspectives on problems and solutions, identify general principles that explain interrelated events. This is why you cannot just take whatever you come to college thinking your major's going to be. This is why you don't know what you don't need to know, or what you will never use. The world's changing too fast to know that. And you can never be sure what you'll learn somewhere else that'll bring a creative insight to your area of particular interest. Do you know what Steve Jobs, you know who Steve Jobs is, right? Founded Microsoft, father of the iPad, iPhone, everything. And unfortunately, he's not with us, but he did a beautiful commencement speech at Stanford in 2005. And it's worth taking the time to Google it and watching the YouTube video. It's really quite inspirational. Do you know what he said was the most important college course he ever took? Calligraphy. Dead on serious. And part of what has been the distinguishing hallmark of Apple and Macintosh, and nobody paid me to do this advertisement, okay? I've been a PC user for years. I still have a PC. But one of the distinguishing features has been the aesthetics. Lots of people could do the computer science. Well, not lots, but maybe a handful. Bill Gates, anyway, okay? But it's the aesthetics and the emphasis on aesthetics. They want employees who can offer logical, well-reasoned conclusions and solutions and test them against relevant criteria and standards. This is what we ask you to do every day when we say, make an argument. Don't just tell us your beliefs, your opinions, how you feel. That's the one that makes me crazy. You know, you feel hot or cold. As an educated person, you should think, you should argue, you should know. They want someone who can apply knowledge to solve problems in real-world settings, demonstrate creativity, innovation, curiosity, and appropriate risk-taking and problem-solving in decision-making. Now, you're likely to say that we aren't very good at asking you to apply things to real-world settings. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We could probably be better at that. That's okay, because real-world settings change very rapidly. The real-world settings are changing very quickly. It's not just about courses in your major. A crucial part is taking the core curriculum and elective courses outside your area of specialization and incorporating insights from those areas as you confront problems in your own area. It's up to you to pay attention in your courses and see how what you are learning develops these skills. Stop for a minute right now and think. Do you ever think about how the various courses you're taking actually might fit together and how you could borrow insights from one in another? Your very first critical thinking, problem-solving task on the way to employment is to figure out how what you learned in college will help the organization you want a job with. Employers are not in the business of rewarding you for excelling in college. They are interested in their organization and what you can do to further the mission of that organization. How will you use what we've trained you to do, what we've helped you practice, what we've inspired you to do, not just to put the right peg in the right hole on the job, but to help the organization succeed? That takes creativity, imagination, diligence, and dedication. It takes curiosity and ambition. Which brings me to my next point, and this really isn't going to go on forever. Einstein said education is what one remains after one has forgotten what one learned at school. And the mission of the core curriculum is education, and education in this sense. Our mission isn't just to prepare you to land your first job, but to equip you to excel in your last job, the one you'll retire from 30, 40, 50 years from now. Half of the technological skills we could teach you as first-year students will be out of date by the time you graduate. Plato, Shakespeare, Max Weber, Das Kapital, pick your great books. I don't know why these sprung to mind right now. They will not be out of date when you graduate. The real challenge is that we are living in a time of incredible rapidity of change. And this is something I think a lot about. What do you need to both make a living and to live a rich and educated life? We are at what is undoubtedly just the beginning of a paradigm-shifting, technology-driven revolution, changing our conceptions of time, space, identity, and boundaries, privacy, ownership, and authority. Social media and data analytics are refiguring our economy, science and medicine, social and political interactions daily. The core curriculum can provide each of you with a mooring, an understanding of human nature, of where we fit in the broad sweep of history as we live through a time of unprecedented rapidity of change. The core and your liberal arts education should give you a sense of how societies, cultures, and subcultures, governments, and individuals have dealt with the innumerable challenges of transformative technological change in the past. The agrarian revolution, the printing press, the industrial revolution, the transportation and digital revolutions. And how have those societies grappled with the enduring questions endemic to the human condition as they play out in each era? Historically and cross-culturally, how have societies and individuals responded to the questions of judgment, values, and morals technological change brings? And when did they get it wrong, and why? Examples abound. The more technology advances in our ability to manipulate the world around us and within us, the more imperative it becomes that we make wise and considered choices and have a strong foundation for doing so. Examples abound. We're on our way to having all the genetic information and reproductive technology to create designer babies. We know how to split atom bombs, both to create bombs and provide the energy necessary to power our digital technologies. We have the ability to collect and mine phenomenal amounts of human information about individuals in an effort to safeguard ourselves against terrorism and partisan dissent. However, our rapidly advancing digital technology cannot make value choices about which of these things we should do, when, and to what degree. A college education and the core curriculum must play a central role in preparing you not just to continue the technological revolution, but to bear the moral burdens it creates. Education is about more than acquiring information. It's about using it. It must be about judgment, values, and moral decision-making. It must arm you to decide what a better world would look like, what a better world would be. The focus must be on using the information to create a better world. It must be about asking the right questions, finding and evaluating the reliability of information, and interpreting and contextualizing information. Through a core curriculum and encountering the best minds of the ages as they have dealt with the enduring questions and challenges of their times, you can develop a rich understanding of your own place, identity, and boundaries in the broader communities in which you live, geographic, cultural, and virtual. You can come to know yourself. A foundational liberal arts curriculum will challenge you and push you into a better understanding of yourselves, your values, as well as those of others, both similar and different on any and every possible dimension. It develops your capacity to engage in moral and ethical reasoning in decision-making across realms, including those stemming from advances in science and technology. It arms you with the ability to think critically about information and assess its reliability and usefulness in problem solving in the workplace and in your most personal life and death decisions. And when you most need them, in times of crisis, in times of change, in times of joy, the words of our great predecessors will ring in your ears. I'll close by sharing some of my favorites with you. You will find, as you complete the core, your own particular favorites. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, and not, when it came to die, discovered that I had not lived. There are only two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. So stay curious and ask, why do I have to take a core curriculum? Why do I have to take these courses outside my major? But ask that question not as an accusation of uselessness, but as an invitation to think deeply about the material at hand and what you might accomplish in the world. I don't expect to have fully convinced you this morning. There are many, as one of my favorites, John Stuart Mill, says, there are many truths of which the full meaning cannot be realized until the personal experience has brought it home. But stay curious, and I do believe everything else will fall into place. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lawrence, for your insightful talk. Now we hear from our second panelist, Dr. Melina Trojan. He is the Associate Professor of Anthropology here at William Paterson University. His research and teaching interests include group formation, globalization, and culture and cognition. Apart from journal articles, he has published many works, which include 2 books. The first one titled Culturalization of Caste in India, Identity and Inequality in a Multicultural Age, which was published in 2011. And he has a co-edited volume titled Against Stigma, Race, Caste, and Justice After Durban, which is on global justice regimes. He is the director of the university core curriculum for the first 3 years of its inception. He is actively involved in popular education projects and solidarity work in New Jersey and New York City. And he has led many study abroad programs. So, welcome.
I wish to thank the committee for organizing such a fascinating topical conference. Wish to thank Provost Sandman for his wonderful remarks, and Dean Carr-Abbott too for introducing the conference in a way that makes it very easy in a way for us, the panelists, to get into what we want to say. Also, I wish to thank the committee for inviting me and for doing such a grand work in getting so many of you out here early morning. Recently, higher education was rescued from a point of view. Last month, economics undergraduate students at the University of Manchester in England formed the Postcrash Economic Society, which they hope will be copied by universities across the country and the world. From their mission statement, and I'm quoting this, following the 2008 recession, we, like many people around the globe, feel that the economics taught cannot explain the world we live in, and so believe it is necessary to start looking at the alternatives. Our group does everything from organizing events with dissenting economists to trying to convince the University of Manchester's economics department that they should change the syllabus. We want more critical theory and reflection to be included, because at the moment, economic students are just told to accept a long list of supposedly self-evident truths instead of being encouraged to truly understand the discipline, end quote. What better example of demand-side economics of curricula than this? Such student revolts raise questions about education that have been posed many times in our history. And you heard a wonderful presentation just before me. Hopefully that's convinced you entirely to take all the 40 credits and more in our own core curriculum. So I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective, which hopefully is complementary and hopefully doesn't frighten the hell out of you in the way Provost Sandman said that there is a view out there, but we need to face some of those things. So here goes. Many of these questions have been posed before, such as, what is education and who determines its meanings in society? Who is supposed to benefit and who are its actual beneficiaries? What are the best institutionalized forms of education? Who owns education in an age of ownership society? And my personal favorite, is education a commodity? And if so, is it like any other commodity, say a cheeseburger? The Manchester students potentially engage with a tradition of radical critiques of schooling, which include a critique of normalized modes of pedagogy and the creation of docile followers, that is, who are taught to the test and who are generating appropriate statistics. For it allows us to bring into dramatic relief a fast disappearing fundamental function of our institutions of learning, and that is that universities, and any institution of higher learning for that matter, primarily function as sites of and for social criticism. A reminder of this function of the university was issued by Harvard's first woman president, Drew Gilpin Faust, who recently noted, and I quote, "As the world indulged in a bubble of false prosperity and excessive materialism, should universities in their research, teaching, and writing have made greater efforts to expose the patterns of risk and denial? Should universities have presented a firmer counterweight to economic irresponsibility? Have universities become too captive to the immediate and worldly purposes they serve? Has the market model become the fundamental and defining identity of higher education?" End quote. She concluded with this. I've just highlighted what I feel are things we are going to have to take away with us for a very, very long time. Inconvenient doubt, and raise the deep and unsettling questions necessary to any society. We must then learn to recognize as a mark of institutional success when students at one of the foremost and oldest civic universities, that's what they call them in the UK, civic universities in the UK chide their institutions and professors for not delivering a curriculum that is civically engaged with one of the most pressing questions of our time, which is whose economy or society or government or university is it anyway? Around the time of the economic crash of 2007-2008, a group of faculty at our own William Paterson University of New Jersey had just embarked on a sustained discussion about our existing and admittedly insipid general education program. After much discussion, collective thinking, some modeling, much introspection, a bit of institutional bullying because we were given very little time to actually produce something and we ended up doing it, some politicking, and mostly some consensus, this fruitful engagement produced a reconstructed university core curriculum launched in September 2011. I thank our previous speaker for the kind words about this curriculum. So many of us believe in it and continue to hope to see it produce what we intend to. And I'll share with you what our secret intentions are. The university core curriculum was launched the same month as the start of the student movement of our times, the Occupy movement, which bequeathed to us the simple yet profound moniker, the 99%, which captures, in my opinion, the most dangerous problems of our time, which is unprecedented, unashamed, and unremitting inequality. You may say I'm a dreamer. I'm not the only one. For those of you who can't read it back there, the sign carried by these Ohio State University students says, no wetlands pipeline, no cowboys merchandise, no tuition and debt hikes, no parking and research privatization, yes to the 99%. Retelling the history of the university core curriculum would require capturing that spirit and that time. To use the title of this conference, Whose University, and respond to it in a direct way, I submit that we, the William Paterson University faculty and others who were involved with building the UCC, were in some ways clearly moved to ask, whose public university is it anyway? To be sure, despite a steady decline in public funding and a steady increase in supporting our institution via student tuition hikes over the last 3 decades, our university remains, at least by official classification, a public university. Yet the question posed thus forces other questions. In what sense is ours a public university? What does a public university attempt to do to be true to its name? More fundamentally, who is the public that constitutes, if not owns, this university? Or is public an effect rather than a cause of this university? That is, do we produce a public, or are we produced by the public, or is it both? I'm sure there are a number of rich discussions to be had around such questions. I will, however, restrict myself to one question that forms part of these frames of discourse. What must public universities produce that everybody should care about? A good place to begin thinking about such a question is to remind ourselves that a public good is something whose costs of production are too much for private citizens to bear, and hence need a collective, such as institutions, to produce, and whose benefits are not diminished by sharing, and hence by definition are produced for all. This is the classic twin principles of non-rivalrous and non-excludable goods, an example of which, for example, would be a lighthouse. You can't prevent a ship from enjoying its lighting, even if it doesn't pay for the lighthouse, and it does not cost anything extra to provide light to one more ship. Or as Craig Calhoun has forcefully argued, to be a really meaningful concept, public good has to refer to benefits we share. Here we have a preliminary answer to our question about what universities need to produce. We need to produce a shared benefit. The paradox, however, is that as universities become increasingly privatized, part of capital's logic of commodification, and as education becomes more of a commodity, the prime mode of embodiment of education becomes the degree. If you ask at a random sample for any section of the student population, this would be the first thing, or maybe the second thing that they'll say, I'm here for a degree. That is if we speak the truth. But the degree happens to be a preeminent property of individuals, not a collective. While it is certainly of benefit to that individual student, and I completely subscribe to everything that was said before me, please ensure that you complete your degree, and that's the only way to live, really. And hopefully everybody will have a chance to get the degree. While it is certainly of benefit to that individual student who is able to make something of that degree, minimally in terms of a job or a career, it would be hard to make a strong claim that the conferring of degrees is the public good that universities produce, since it does not, at least directly, have a shared benefit to society. But the question that could be asked is, and it is asked all the time, why can't universities simply focus on preparing students for a job market? Addressing this question presents the strongest battle of ideas about the future of higher education today. And it is here that the Occupy movement and other such movements, largely sustained by students, have shown us some kind of a way. Increasingly, general education, or the core curriculum, which is at least a century old in most US American universities, and which has always stood for something more than only producing a skilled workforce, is sought to be legitimized within a neoliberal logic that asserts that anything of value is always only an economic value. Or in other words, it only has value if it has an exchange value. Here are two well-intentioned examples of justifying core curricula that make their case narrowly within the demands of employers. And I actually like both of these. I've used many of them. We've talked about this as we were designing the core curriculum. So you are, if you take the core curriculum seriously, you are going to be well placed to actually get the jobs. But I'm going to say something more than that. So these are, for example, this is from a survey. Don't know if you can read it clearly. This is from a survey in 2007, and this is from the Association of American Colleges and Universities, a premier organization that talks about general education. And 1 through 10, these are all skills that job employers are looking. And on our UCC website, you will see some links to all of these. And hopefully, as you go through the 40 credits, you will acquire almost all of these skills. But you also have to have the ability to say that you have acquired these skills in A and B and C ways. Here is another thing, which is from a more recent work in 2013, a very important work that talks about work and that isolates 3 new skills because of the changing face of work: solving unstructured problems, working with new information, and carrying out non-routine tasks. Admittedly, in an economy that is straining to produce jobs, the latest statistics from the Labor Office is 1 job created for every 3 unemployed people, and those are official statistics. A focus on surviving through getting jobs is understandable. These are important arguments, and any university curriculum must try to enable as many of these skills as possible. However, notably missing in both the lists of skills, this one and the one previous, is any mention of the dispositions, knowledge, desires, and yes, skills that would be able to question why economies change the way they do, why jobs disappear from particular places, why governments are increasingly distrusted by their own citizenry, why conflicts in the workplace, society, and the globe have become a normal part of everyone's existence, and so on. In short, what is missing is attention to any systemic inquiry into the state of our world and our beings. It reminds me of what one of the radical teachers from a poor province in northeast Brazil said many decades ago, and I quote, "When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why they are poor, they call me a communist." End quote. I want to go further and therefore argue that any job or economy-driven argument for a core curriculum is not enough for the students who most need society to change in order to be assured of a life of dignity. And it is here that producing a public in the Calhounian sense that I have referred to before becomes impossible to ignore except at the cost of our students' long-term well-being. Such arguments that reproduce the logic of neoliberalism and market in justifying higher educational curricula deny the need to produce a change-making public, relying instead on the invisible hand of the market alone and the thoroughgoing internalization of particular sets of values that are actually ideological but are sought to be passed off as naturally universal. These values, for example, include particular ideas of private individuals over collective and collaborative thinking, individual success over group well-being, and competition over cooperation. Crucially, it neglects to point out a fact that given the current state of the world, the bottom 2/3 or 3/4 or even the 99% of our society are the ones who most desperately need fundamental changes in society's rules of reproduction. For society and the world as it currently exists does not work for them. Here is a 1-minute state of the world. This is the world into which all of us enter. It implicates capital. It's very flighty, very fertile, huge amounts of profit, furiously going around the world. With one click, with nanotechnology, $1 trillion gets transported across national borders every day in terms of currency speculation. It's also about fictional capital, capital that doesn't exist, and then we have busts and booms. It's also about power, the politics. It's a multipolar world. It's very unstable in many ways. It's also having transnational or trans-state entities that dictate things to national economies. There's a huge amount of problems with security, we know that. Then there's also surveillance technology, environment. Boy, what have we done to that? It's devastated. The kinds of consumption, the patterns of consumption, the ways in which it is localized in particular parts of the world, all of that are definitely unsustainable. We need many planets in order to keep that going. And we have to have some way in which we not only talk about the crisis of political representation, the limits of ecology on capital's rapacity, but also the twin challenges of culture. One, as a site of ideological legitimation. Culture is sought to legitimize status quo, but the same culture is also a site of radical resistance. And here are some key demographic features, as I see it, of our own student body. All of you are wonderful, and we all wish you all the best. But here is also some objective reality for us to think through. Our students are amongst the most historically disempowered subjects in our society today. They are overwhelmingly from working-class families, many first-generation college-going, large populations of historically minoritized, and many new immigrant groups, including white ethnic groups, large proportions working 1 to 3 jobs while going to university, a majority taking loans at a dizzyingly increasing rate, many suffering the effects of a K-12 schooling that did not serve their basic needs, and all incredibly anxious, along with parents and guardians, about getting a job in an economy which does not seem to be producing employment easily. Some of this has been mentioned before. All of this is known, probably. The student debt problem is growing. So the blue line is the credit card debt, and the student debt is much higher. And it's linked to college tuition soaring. It's also linked to the fact that, which the provost himself pointed out, that over the last 3 decades, our state appropriation, that is the budget that we get from the New Jersey state, is dropped, and now it's about 30 or 31%. Will simply acquiring the new skills demanded by the changed economy be enough to sustain our students, their families, or their communities in the long run? Some myth busting here is in order. And this is where it gets frightening. It frightens me too. I take this from a very, very important book that I would definitely encourage everybody to pick. It's also cheap. It's called Kicking Away the Ladder, and it's about how rich countries got rich and how poor countries do not have the same ladder that is being kicked away that the rich countries used in order to get rich. And it's by a Cambridge economist who incidentally supported the Manchester students openly. But what are some of the myth bustings? We need to understand who gets to the top and how, and there are a lot of myths about that. And since when have those people who are at the top been at the top? What is the top? Being at the bottom, what does it mean? Why do people feel that they're at the bottom? Are they really at the bottom? What does bottom mean? About shaky foundations of an unequal society, very, very shaky. About the ladder itself, and about its non-availability. Well, there it goes. The ladder went away. To go back to those notions of education, the public, and the UCC, we wanted to build an institution, a curriculum in this case, that would produce a map of reality and the world that our students would feel empowered with. Our core curriculum intends to enable production of what Etienne Balibar has called citizen subjects. That is, individuals who embody and have an awareness of themselves as bearers of rights and duties. And they have rights and duties due to the fact of belonging to collectives while striving to become subjects of history or history makers rather than subjects of a sovereign. In short, citizen subjects who would constitute the public as a civil or political society instead of merely being individuated and alienated docile worker populations silently reproducing systems of power and inequality in more efficient ways. I'm just going to wrap up. The UCC attempts to become a curriculum that takes into account the fact that working class students need to form that public in large numbers in order to not only or not simply reproduce social reality, but to fundamentally help reconstitute that social reality which does not work for the 99%. Our students need a core curriculum that will facilitate them to imagine the change they need to see, and then, of course, participate in becoming the change that they want to see. It needs to be a curriculum for students, but is not yet by and of students. That only time will tell. In short, it is what a core curriculum for a university of, for, and by the 99% would need to look like. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we're just going to pause here because I know some of you have to leave. We have other engagements or classes. So thank you so much to both of our panelists.